Usually what I try to do here is give a quick little, I wouldn't say report, but LRA has been working this past year on a variety of projects, but I decided to do something different this time, which is sort of do something more thematic, because I think that something is great, actually, something great is happening in our country. The ground is actually shaking. On the one hand, we've been robbed. We've been robbed by the greedy, incompetent bankers, by the Wall Street schemers, and too many of the corporate CEOs, all of whom were protected by the politicians who we give a lot of money to. Now, they just managed to drive the entire economy off the cliff. And I always wonder why anybody ever listens to Robert Rubin anymore, or any of his followers, given that they have failed so miserably in terms of what has happened in the economy. For if economic leaders are supposed to be about or judged by how well they advance our economy for the good of all people, then they have failed. But if we want real change, if we want to seize the moment before us, we must not let the country forget that this is a robbery that has taken place over the last 3 decades. The most dangerous nonsense that I hear rocketing around the country that comes from the talking heads and the politicians is that the people, that's all of us here and all around the country, acted irresponsibly. Now, I hear that and I think that they've either lost their minds, or they ignore the truth, or they are blatantly lying, or a combination of all 3 things. And it's up to us in the labor movement to tell a pretty simple collective story. For 30 years and longer, people have worked hard. Productivity in America has rocketed off the charts. But instead of getting more for producing more, most people have been getting less for the hard work that they've put into their jobs. Now, we need to keep telling that story of the people who had to make choices about what bills to pay and what bills had to be put off because paychecks were just too small to make ends meet. We can't forget how many people often had to take part-time minimum wage jobs, poverty-level wages, so that they could just put food on the table, even if that meant sleeping fewer hours, or spending less time with their kids. People had to decide whether to raid a small financial nest egg, usually to pay for a medical emergency, or maybe to make sure that there was enough gas just to get to work. We can't tell the real story of this robbery if the day after the government declares the recession over, or the depression, however you want to define it, we ignore the 45 million Americans who earn $10.21 an hour or less, or the moral obscenity that in the richest nation on earth, 1/4 of the population earns poverty-level wages. That means $9.60 or lower. Or the moral obscenity that 48 million Americans had no health insurance in 2008. And millions more are paying immoral prices for inadequate health care. Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist or an economist to understand that without a decent paycheck, we, the people, were forced to live on credit cards and home equity loans, not to buy yachts or McMansions or homes in the Riviera, but simply to survive. The truth is that the vast majority of people in this country acted quite responsibly, given the hand they were dealt, an economic system that denied them the fruits of their hard work and forced them to patch together ways to make ends meet every day. So the real story of the current crisis is not Bernie Madoff. It is that our financial, corporate, and political leaders played a hustle on us, rarely questioning, and I make that as a bipartisan observation, an economic system that has destroyed the absolute idea of fairness in America. They blame the government, they blame immigrants, and the worst part, they blamed hard-working union members, the people who make sure our public services run, our teachers, our transit workers, our auto workers, who had fought for generations to build a middle class, the people who built America. And the people have a right to ask, while this robbery was taking place, where were the voices of the politicians who now express outrage, as if it was news, that executives were taking home hundreds of millions of dollars in pay and bonuses, while the rest of us were getting shortchanged? I know you were shocked to learn, you union members, just in the last year or two, that executives were being paid millions of dollars in bonuses and pay. This was a great shock to you. It was like gambling. There's gambling in this house. And aside from collecting huge paychecks or campaign contributions, what were our political and economic leaders doing while this small elite was vacuuming up the vast wealth of the country? So that's the bad news. The good news is, and I think we can be actually optimistic about the future, is that the outrage, the justifiable outrage that is echoing across our nation, gives us a chance, and I think a once-in-a-generation chance, to put the power of shaping our economic future back into the hands of the people. The people who defended this system are nervous. They see how the people are speaking up. They see the anger, and they are rushing to hold back the winds of change. Now, we hear from our holier-than-thou turned populist politicians, who are now all of a sudden our best friends, rushing to mint their brand new set of principles, talking about reform and the need to re-regulate. But we cannot miss the chance to go much deeper. We have the chance, I believe, in the coming year and the coming 2 or 3 years to say, enough is enough. The time has come for a new set of rules. Rules that benefit the people and not the elites. But we will only do that if we act boldly, take some chances, and not follow the same political playbook. So there are very specific things I think we need to do. Really changing the rules means putting in place a healthcare system that can save families and businesses hundreds of billions of dollars over the coming decade. A single-payer system, or what many of us call Medicare for all. It is the only system that makes economic sense, not to mention moral sense. Changing the rules means ending the tyranny of the financial system in our lives, ending the godlike, unaccountable status of the Federal Reserve Board, getting control over the shadow banking system, the private equity and hedge funds. And I know this is a very controversial point in this room. The greatest force for economic recovery, the greatest force for advancement for people, is the labor movement. We are not perfect, but the surest road to a sturdy recovery and to a check on corporate power is the labor movement. Now, we have to be honest, and I believe Kate made a reference to this, and she's right. We are not taking advantage of the moment. The people are crying out. They are enraged, but they are also listening. They want bold, decisive leadership, and they want action. And our only response to the pain that they feel too often seems to be EFCA, EFCA, EFCA. Now, I'm all for the Employee Free Choice Act, but I'll tell you, I was astonished that in the very days that the financial system was collapsing last fall, we in the labor movement could barely muster a block's worth of people to stand in Wall Street and be the voice of people whose life savings are vanishing. That was an embarrassment. We should have had 100,000 people in the streets. But the beauty about life is that redemption is always just around the corner. In September, the G20, the gathering of the leaders of the 20 major economies of the world, are gathering in our city. They are the rule makers. They do everything behind closed doors. So we in the labor movement should lead an effort to put 1 million people in the streets to demand that we never go back to the system that has impoverished the people here and around the globe. We cannot let them make those decisions in comfort.